Marshall Field famously said, "Give the lady what she wants." And Chicago architect Daniel Burnham said, "Make no small plans." Both men's vision and legacy live on here at the Marshall Field and Company building on State Street, now occupied and run expertly by Macy and Company. Welcome to this special tour of Macy's on State. I'm Stanley Smith. Meet Me Under the Clock, another landmark in downtown Chicago. Two clocks. This one is at State Street and Randolph. And there's another matching clock at the State and Washington end of the building. Uh, Marshall Field and Company occupied the store from its inception. And the namesake nameplates are here in place as always, and they've been lovingly restored recently. Many people might not have noticed that, but until recently they were a little weather worn looking with a oxidized patina color, and they've been lovingly restored. The black background refreshed and the letters burnished into this beautiful gold tone. This is the State Street facade of the building, which is essentially unchanged. To most of our recollection, it would look just as it did when the store was operated by Macy or by Marshall Field. The Randolph side of the store has a glimpse of the fine tradition of window displays, which continues on State Street and Randolph and Washington, and also on the Wabash Street side of the store. As you enter in the first floor, we're entering in today at the North State Street room, step onto some of the more what you might be perceived as original marble floor tiles. This is not the original to the building. The Daniel Burnham marble was taken out probably in the 60s or 70s for renovation. But a lot of this marble is what most of us here in Chicago are familiar with on the first floor of the store. Also looking up into the North State Street light well, we see a lot of familiar architecture, the Corinthian columns and the different balconies and railings and the Ionic capitals leading up to the 13th floor. A lot of this was opened up and refreshed in the late 80s, 90 renovation when they removed a lot of grill work and walls, which had previously pretty much blocked off a lot of the atrium space. The lore of the time was that a lot of that grill work and walled off area was put up after the 1930s, after the stock market crashed, to prevent an opportunity for people to take an easy way out. The State Street, North State Street room was traditionally, in my time, and most people's recollection, the cosmetic room. It was a much larger space than it currently is. It was somewhat reconfigured when they renovated the store to put in a loading dock and remove the alley, which originally ran through the building from Randolph to Washington. I believe it was called Holden Court. And they closed that in and made a loading dock, and they took out a considerable large portion of this North State room and moved cosmetics to a different part of the store. Traditionally, when this was cosmetics, and even in the South State Street room, the floor was divided into these four quadrants with large ledge opportunity for large, spectacular visual displays. And this has been modified over the years, and they've gone to more individualized vendor branded departments, and they eliminated those ledge spaces. So in this North State room, they created this platform, which it's a little disconcerting when you first walk in. It does impede the sight lines to the light well, but as you traverse the space going up to the various floors, it does provide a nice visual setting and splash of color in the North State room. This is looking up in the light well up to the 13th floor. The store was originally 13 floors, merchandising up to about maybe 8 and 9, and then there were services, dry cleaning, different departments, the workings of the store. The 13th floor was the visual merchandising department, the Frango kitchen, the carpenter shop, and painters and all the different trades. They had one room that was just filled with slabs of marble, which were constantly being replaced and repaired on the first floor. So it's looking down into the light well toward the first floor, and you can see the various floors, different departments in the North State Street light well. Then as we enter the South State Street room, which is the opposite end of the State Street side of the building, we enter this atrium space. They were having a fashion show when I toured the store this last Saturday. Ladies modeling gowns. I'm assuming it might be prom season. A number of people were gathered there to snap pictures of this impromptu fashion show. And again, you can see the original the floor, what we would perceive as original from a later renovation, still in place. And this room is again is um, very familiar to us as we enter the South State Street room. Of course, looking up to the Tiffany Dome, which is a landmark here in the Chicago area, and especially such a significant part of the State Street store. Another view of the Tiffany Dome. There are these Tiffany chandeliers. There's two of the original three chandeliers. There was a third chandelier that matched that hung from this central portion. And it was missing in my time, but it did float around the store. We saw it. It was in the men's department for a while. You'd see it used in different departments and different setups. I haven't seen it for a long time. It was originally taken out, is my understanding, because oftentimes this was used as a drop hoist for large, spectacular decorations, Christmas installations, which were hoisted up through the hole that would have originally held the chandelier. This is also in the South State Street room, and this is one of the last remaining central staircases which were in the building. Each quadrant of the building had a staircase. I think there were originally five. And this is the last one that I'm aware of remaining. It actually is truncated. It only goes up to about three. A lot of the stairs have been removed over the years. They became obsolete, probably even in the time of the escalators and elevators. And then, of course, after some renovations, they really were no longer needed. But it's nice that this one remains. This actually is some of the original Daniel Burnham marble. You can see the white marble. It's a little bit more dull and buff than the creamier color that we're more familiar with. Also, this balcony, this landing was used as a balcony by Philip Miller when he announced the late 80s, 90s renovation of the store, which put in a central atrium. And as I remember, my recollection was that at the time they were trying to take the store from $150 million annual sales to $250 million annual sales by making the store more attractive, integrated, and efficient. This is looking down into the South State Street room, which is now cosmetics. I think in my time it was originally handbags and jewelry and accessories, hosiery, like when they used to actually sell hosiery. And status handbags were in the mid State Street room. They had the Chanel and they had Ralph Lauren, they had Gucci and Bottega Veneta, and all the luxury brand handbags were in the central room. But here from this vantage point, we can see the top of the Corinthian columns, which are very familiar to us. In my time, it was a slightly more off-white color. It's actually kind of a startling, it's almost so white you can't see some of the detail on the first floor, but it's beautifully refreshed and beautifully illuminated. They put in these drop ceilings, tray lighting in the late 80s, 90s renovation. And it's a wonderful vantage point. Also, a lot of us tell ourselves these stories that they can't do things like they used to. They can't, there's no craftsmanship to reproduce what was in the past. But that's not true because in my time watching the evolution of the State Street store, as they've taken out elevator banks and escalators and reconfigured spaces, I've seen them recreate some of these Corinthian capitals where they didn't previously exist. And this is looking at the South Wabash room, which is on the Wabash side of the store. This is the oldest section of the store. I believe this building dates from the 1890s. And it was the last remaining block of everything that was original to the store that was torn down to create the Daniel Burnham version of the store. So this is the most original part of the building. And if you look at the exterior, you can see the cladding and the architecture is completely different, but kind of charmingly integrated with the later version of the architecture. Very plain columns, and this is still fine jewelry. It was fine jewelry in my time. They had estate jewelry to the right. They had Angela Cummings department. It's always been a beautiful room. The chandeliers have always been in place. And again, this is pretty much unchanged. In the distance, you can see some of this grill work they put in the late 80s, 90s, kind of a retro historic looking thing, which is actually a modern version of traditional. And also in the South Wabash room, some jewelry branded as R.H. Macy and Company. Kind of intriguing, and a beautiful shot of the chandelier overhead. They've done a nice job at Macy's on State, maintaining a traditional appeal and look to the store, and combining with more modern items. I snapped this picture just because it has one of these Art Deco panels, glass panels, which were originally from the Water Tower store. When they closed the Water Tower store, they repurposed these panels here. Originally, it was a kind of a frieze of panels all put together in the fine jewelry department at Water Tower. And here in this room, they've been broken up as little accents around the room. Also in the South Wabash room is a original iron staircase going down into the basement. In my time, it wasn't visible. It was walled off behind the Fields of Fire department, and it was not needed. It led down to the lower level, which connected to the building across the street, the men's store, which, as I understood it at the time, was the longest continual retail aisle in the United States, reaching across the entire block of between Randolph and Washington, under the street, and into the men's store across the street at Wabash and Washington. This is a little detail that is on display at the as you cross out of the South Wabash room into the Mid Wabash room. It's an antiquated drinking fountain that's no longer in use, but they have a little sign on top of it talking about the history of Marshall Field and Company. And this is the Mid-State or Mid Wabash room, which was and always continues to be the men's department after they moved the men's store into the State Street location. This fountain was in the late 80s, 90s renovation, central atrium, and it was relocated to this location. As I understand it, architects, when they were working on the 80s, 90s renovation, came across this in original plans that Daniel Burnham had for the State Street store, which Marshall Field did not pursue at the time. So they resurrected this idea and recreated this fountain. And it was in the central part of the store, and that was relocated to the men's department as kind of a nice gathering place. A nice photo opportunity in the men's store, a Marshall Field clock, a kind of clock image against the background. This color changes seasonally. Their current theme is this lovely blue sky theme, and I've seen it red at Christmas time and different colors at different seasons. Kind of creates an accent. Even as you cross from the State Street side into the Mid Wabash room, you can see it from quite a distance, and it's a nice backdrop. Also on the Wabash side in the North Wabash room, which traditionally was candy. It was the candy department as I remember it. They've relocated this Frango department here. They're kind of pushing the Marshall Field branded items, the Frango, some of the legacy items, because they realized over the years that there is a never-ending market. As I was crossing State Street, snapping my pictures of the State Street store, I did come across other people snapping pictures, and I could hear the muffled mentions of Marshall Field and how this was the famous Marshall Field store, now Macy's. And I think they're living into that legacy somewhat as they feature some of these items. Other branding of the Marshall Field Frango brand is elsewhere in the store. These bus forms I've seen in the store for quite some time. They always remind me of the missing chandelier, the missing chimney chandelier. The Frango brand is so particularly interesting because it was originally acquired when Marshall Field and Company purchased Frederick and Nelson, the Frederick and Nelson department store. I believe it was in Seattle, and they were Franco mints in honor of Frederick and Nelson Company. And then in the Second World War, the name was altered to Frango. I guess there was a hiccup with the idea of being associated with Franco of Spain, dictator at the time. Other Marshall Field branded items are available throughout the store. But the whole purpose of this video really was to take us on a tour of what a delightful experience it is to visit the Macy's store on State Street this spring. They've transformed the store into really a delightful experience. I described it as, made me feel happy. You could call it a surreal flower show. It's not technically a flower show. They don't currently have one. Marshall Fields did not have a flower show per se. It was really brought to the store by Dayton Hudson Company, which introduced it when they owned the store, and that was also a spectacular experience with the whole entire first floor banked with rhododendrons and azaleas and flowers and tulips and hyacinths and every manner of flower, spring flower you can imagine on every ledge on the first floor, and huge containers reaching and stretching over the main aisle on both sides, and the entire State Street window facade of the store was solid, wall to wall flowers. It looked like the Botanic Garden came in. It was truly stunning. So this is a different version um, of the same idea, just bringing some life and some light and some color into the State Street store. And this is a close-up of some of the colorful displays they have in these cross-throughs between the State Street and Wabash side, featuring fashion and the surreal sky, which is kind of a nod to Renee Magritte, and spring fashions put together by Chip and Melina and all the team, the visual team at the Macy's store, they've done a spectacular job this season. There's another view of the theme this season, the blue sky and the giant flowers in spring fashion. You can see the late 80s, 90s remnant of the central atrium, which was put in. And then I think it was in there maybe 15, 20 years at least, maybe. And then it was just recently altered as they reconfigured the store once again. Another close up of spring fashion. They did a nice job putting things on display and then having it very adjacent. It's very easy to shop, and there's ample quantities of merchandise. I think it's been a while since we've seen a truly well-stocked store. It's not overstocked, it's not packed, it's not crowded, but it's a beautiful depth of merchandise in the store this season. This is the men's department showing the spring fashion and different layering against the blue sky flower theme. Another shot of the men's department showing the theme. I am not a big fan of light boxes, but I will say they did a great job in this store. It's a very big store. It's kind of cavernous with tall ceilings, and the light boxes really do create a very vibrant, eye-catching thread through the entire store. So no matter where you are, you can see it off in the distance and across the atriums. It's high visibility, and it really tells a nice story. This I thought was especially charming in the men's department. Again, if you're a Marshall Field fan, you'd feel right at home in this scene. Doesn't get much more traditional or recognizable than this with all the original architectural features. Very nicely put together on looking into the North State Street room. Another shot of the men's displays. This rack is empty. They're still working. I was in the store on a Saturday, and they're still pulling the store together for spring and also for a corporate visit. They're going to have the Macy's leadership team from across the country gathering on State Street this Wednesday for a merchandise meeting. Brands. I was noticing brands at Macy's that I hadn't really noticed before. I think some of us, for whatever reason, have it in our minds that Macy's is somewhat of a down market a retailer, but it didn't seem to be so. I also took a tour this season of the Bloomingdale's store here in Chicago, the Nordstrom store, and Neiman Marcus. And I would say that Macy's seems to be on par as far as brands. I give them more credit for a little bit more color, a little bit more dynamic presentation. Of course, Neiman's was looking spectacular as ever. I remember when I worked at Marshall Field, in any of our planning meetings, what we're going to do for the next season and what to feature, somebody would inevitably say, "Oh, but what is Neiman's doing?" And someone would be sent in a cab over to see what Neiman Marcus was doing. And Macy and Company is not Neiman Marcus, but it's a pretty close poor man's second version. It was looking pretty good, and it was just as happy as experience visiting Macy's as it was visiting Neiman Marcus this season. Men's department, okay, I give them credit. This is a little directional, perhaps, for most men. Lavender or pink suit. I mean, it did work for Jay Gatsby, but I think this is an important merchandising technique to have something for everybody. You might not wear this, but it tells you you're in a department that it's fashion forward. and has something for everybody. You might not want to wear head to toe pink or lavender, but maybe the pants with a blue blazer or vice versa. My friend Marcy, the fashion stylist, could help you put that all together. Also, the men's department, the name brands, Ralph Lauren, Polo, Ralph Lauren department, very traditional, um, very Marshall Field like. And in the next room, the more colorful, casual sportswear attire for spring, lovely. In the women's departments, and that also Ralph Lauren branded boutique here. Lovely merchandising display, really appealing, really appealing. We don't follow trends per se, but blush, this pink color is very popular this season. And if you're into trends, they pulled it all together for you here. Calvin Klein department in the women's department is again a different feeling, but nicely put together, beautifully merchandised, and nicely branded. More women's floor, again, lovely setting, beautiful merchandise, nicely displayed. Couldn't be more pleasant. Very happy feeling. Another landing display with the merchandise and the merchandise available, the blue sky, and the cloud theme. In my time, I do remember Fields doing the clouds at least twice, once in my time and once later. Uh, was a stronger, maybe Rene Magritte theme, and they had the store draped with blue sky fabric. They had banners from the top and bottom of the atriums, and it was big, puffy white clouds against blue sky. And it really was a lovely complement to the architecture as it is this season. This is the dress department for women, and they had tremendous variety and selection and terrific quantities of everything. It'd be hard not to find something that you were looking for this season in the dress department. All these pink versions put together here, and again, you see it on display, and then you don't have to go hunting for it or ask for sales help because it's right there. And again, such a variety. Maybe this is not your style, but definitely has curb appeal. In this department, this is the dresses and ready to wear. Again, this is just a casual shot looking across the floor, but again, very appealing merchandise, beautiful color. A lot of the other stores were very dry. Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom's were very dry. It was earth tones and very muted colors, which I appreciate, but Macy's and State had done a really great job. The merchandising was terrific. They had a great selection and range of colors and styles. When you think of Marshall Field and the history of Marshall Field and fashion, of course, the 28 shop comes to mind. And 28 shop brand is still there as a thread. Maybe it's not exactly what it was known to be, but there still is technically an area of the store called and branded the 28 shop. There's a placard as you enter the space, giving a nod to the history of its previous life with a photograph of the original 28 shop, which I'm yet to remember if was on 4 or 5. It is in the older part of the store, the 1890s section, which we looked at earlier. And that section is not always perfectly lined up with the Daniel Burnham floor. So you either have to walk, I think most often you have to walk down. And that was certainly the case with the 28 shop. You had to kind of go down a ramp, which kind of gave you a special feeling. And you had to go down this ramp, and everything was gray, draped in gray, kind of a gray tweed fabric. It was very mysterious. And you'd walk in, then it would open up to this big expanse of space with very spare furnishings and very spare merchandising. And it was all about full service. And it had its own private entrance, 28 shop at 28 West Washington, its own private elevator. The elevator's still there. Somewhere in my archives, I have some photographs of the little elevator banks for the 28 shop. Inside the 28 shop, the new version of the 28 shop, it's primarily dresses. It's primarily the dress department. And, they made a nice job. It's very luxurious and elegant looking. And again, this blush tone, just seeing a lot of that really lends itself to giving this a very quiet, hushed elegance feeling to it. Again, luxurious gowns. It's primarily gowns and party wear, all expertly merchandised here for the season. Again, I was just struck by the quality and the breadth of the stock. I mean, They've got a nice quantity of these gowns available. And in the middle of the 28 shop, I wandering around, I just happened to wander in uh, to State Street last Saturday. I ran into Chip, Albert Hendon, from the visual display department. He and Melina Konstantos and the visual team have just done such a terrific job. And I couldn't compliment Chip enough on what a terrific job he and the team had done. I actually asked Rachel, one of the salespeople adjacent to the 28 shop, to snap our picture of my visit to the Macy's on State. Chip encouraged me to continue my tour of the store and take a look at all the improvements and new displays this season. This is a lovely display I just came across looking into the South State Street room, these lavender dresses and these kind of zany trees on display here. Very pretty. Chip also encouraged me to visit the shoe salon, which has been elevated with new fixturing and marble top console tables and etagères for a much improved shopping experience. Looking across some of the sales floors for ready to wear, this is again just an iteration of the blue fresh theme this season. Makes for such a lovely shopping experience. Here's another close up of some of the merchandising and the ready to wear floors. And I snapped this picture. I think they might still be working on this because the mannequins they're probably going to put these mannequins on top of these stairs. But I thought it was such a great visual, great prop. They're stairs, they're curved, they're a beautiful color. And they're having some fun at State Street. I escalated up to the furniture floor, which is, I believe, on 6. And this is looking into what's the remnant of the central atrium that was put in the late 80s and 90s. And furniture floor was always a favorite of mine. When I worked in an office downtown, I was having a stressful day. Sometimes I just wander over to the furniture floor at Marshall Fields. It was on the 8th floor, and it was always had a hushed silence about it. A beautiful antique room that was all encased in a glass room with a hush elegance and a blue gray carpet. Of course, the Trend House, you could wander through the Trend House and just, it's almost like a museum. It was like going to the Art Institute to visit the furniture floor. When I got off the escalator on the furniture floor, I was greeted by this Hendon dining room set, which was nice to see. I do remember Hendon and Baker furniture being really the highest quality of craftsmanship and design. Truly stunning pieces available. This is a beautiful presentation with a blue and white porcelain setting and this giant chandelier in your face. On the furniture floor, they also had, in place of the Trend House, they had these apartment living, which was kind of a fun idea, apartment living, and they had mapped out a 750 square foot area to show how life might be, what it might look like in a tiny Chicago apartment. And around the corner, they had I think a 950 square foot apartment set up. In the lower level, they've relocated tabletop, china, crystal, flatware. Lower level or basement maybe sounds a little down market, but they've done a very nice job. That the lower level is just as lovely as being upstairs, and everything is merchandised with loving care. Here is a tabletop display in the tabletop department. Also in the lower level is bedding. And again, I was not following this trend, but it was following me, this plush. Here I see it again in bedding and towels. Also in the lower level, the book department with a vintage photo of Fields Past showing the hat department, millinery, which is, of course, long before my time, thank God. But it's a fun little nod to the past. Also in the book department, this beautiful photograph of State Street, the clock, and the American flags flying over State Street and the Marina City off in the distance. One thing that's fun about visiting the Macy's store is that there are these little moments of the past, these unchanged features of the building. This is one of them on the lower level, this cut through to the subway, which is literally unchanged. They did add this charming photograph, the same photograph we saw in the book department, to the landing to give people a visual cue to the fact that they're entering the Marshall Field building in the Macy store. Another example of kind of these moments lost in time when you're on many of the escalator surround, the stainless steel, this gleaming stainless steel surrounds, and some of this marble cladding give you the sense that you're still in the same old store. And this especially is amusing looking up to the Marshall Field Green and the Frango branding at the top of the escalator. It's like a moment in the past in the present time. This is in the lower level showing the escalators, which are pretty much unchanged, and some of this metal work, this aluminum cladding, and some of these wall surrounds, which are essentially as we remember them from many, many years ago. On the seventh floor, I just thought this was such a great um, example of, you know, boy, you could think you were in the 70s or 80s here, or even the 30s probably. All this stainless steel metal work and kind of deco-ish elevator design. Bank of elevators on the seventh floor, just outside the Narcissus room. This is one of three crystal chandeliers that, for no apparent reason, are just adorning the space to give it a luxurious, lost, kind of forgotten part of the store. I was able to snap this picture of the Narcissus room looking through some of the fogging on the glass doors looking into the space. I think it's probably used as an event space, but you had to kind of you had to get creative if you wanted to get a view of the room inside. Also on the seventh floor, I think this is very well known, the Walnut Room. When I was there on Saturday, there was a big party going on, and somebody was announcing, I don't know, prizes or fashion. I wasn't really sure. It wasn't my place to intrude, but I did snap this picture showing the fountain and spring flowers. And this, of course, is where the great tree is put up each holiday season to create a festive look in the Walnut Room. The store is currently going to the seventh floor. So the eighth floor, actually, you're looking into what will eventually be office space. So this is kind of just glassed off. And I'm assuming that when it's converted to a tenant, it will be either shades or drapes or some sort of fogging. And then you're looking up to the ninth floor. This atrium did originally go up to the top of the building, up to the 12th or 13th floor. And in my time, I would hear references to a second Tiffany dome. The Walnut Room is, of course, sitting on top of the Tiffany dome below it in the State Street room. And supposedly there was another Tiffany dome above the atrium that extended up to 12 above this space, but I've never seen a picture of it. I've never seen any documentation about it, but that was simply the lore. And I'm not really sure when this atrium was cut down, but I do believe that dry cleaning and different departments were put on the floors that were created above this space after that happened. So on the seventh floor is this archive kind of museum they have going on there, which I do remember, but it seems much nicer than I remember it. This charming Norman Rockwell recreation of his famous illustration for the Saturday Evening Post of the State Street clock. And I didn't spend a lot of time looking at all this information, but I think this is about the great tree and the history of that. And my understanding, as I was told from people who remember, this tree was originally of course, a live tree they would drag a live tree into the store. It would come in the Randolph Street side of the store, come down the main aisle and be hoisted up the North State light well, and then dragged down the main aisle into the Walnut Room and set up. And this photo, if you go to the store, you can see this photo. It does show some of those upper floors which no longer exist above the Walnut Room. This really caught my eye because I do remember this commemorative plaque, which was originally on the first floor in the South State Street room, wrapped around one of the Corinthian columns. You'd see it as you came in the door every time on the first floor, and it was charming. I believe these are people who worked for the store or who were associated from the store who died in the Second World War, along with another commemorative plaque. Charming history. This is from the Marshall Field boardroom, which I believe was on 8. So apparently they had to relocate that. I remember visiting Andrea Schwartz in public relations over the years for different projects, and I remember her office was across the hall from this boardroom. For whatever reason, I do remember a portrait of Marshall Field somewhere in this boardroom, but maybe it was at the other end, the portion of which is not shown here. And I don't remember the fireplace, but this is some of the paneling from the boardroom of the Marshall Field and Company. Another charming display in the little museum area are these photographs of different walnut room trees over the years, 70s and 80s and 2000s, and these little display cases below each one with the actual ornaments from those trees, which is almost a miracle. I don't know who saves ornaments from the 70s, but God love whoever did. I do remember Homer Sharp and his team, Sally Palzniak and her helpers, who spent, I mean, they spent a good part of the year making a lot of these ornaments from scratch. I do remember them molding them, pulling them out of the mold, and then painting each one. It seemed painstaking. I don't know what they were thinking. I guess it was before imports from China, but a miraculous process they went through. Homer Sharp was in charge of what he called the spectaculars, which was all the huge first floor installations for the holidays and other seasons. Victor Skrubneski, there was a small shout out to Victor Skrubneski and his work in advertising. He was a famous Chicago photographer, and there are a number of photographs on this column, which I did not take a photo of because it's hard to take a photo with a decent quality, but beautiful photographs. You could probably Google them. One of the most famous ones was on a State Street photo of a bride and a groom with this misty atmosphere all around as she's peering into the State Street windows. Victor Skrubneski was also famous for later redesigning Water Tower Park, which we enjoyed for many, many years until it also was reconfigured more recently into the Jane Byrne Park. Also in the museum area, vintage merchandise, hats and shoes, which I don't remember ever seeing before. In the museum, they also included this original sketch, drawing, and model of the late 80s, 90s renovation of the central atrium portion of the store. I do remember this drawing, this vision, as it was unveiled by Phil Miller. And there's a photograph of the central atrium. The original store was in two halves. There was the State Street side and the Wabash side, and you had to cross over. So if you were on the first floor, you would have to go outside into the alley and then run across real quick in the freezing cold to get to re-enter the other side of the store. And then in the upper levels, there were what they called bridges, where it was connected. And basically, as I remember, it was two central cores, open space that were all the fire escapes for the emergency egress of the building. And so in this renovation, they basically took out the fire stairs in the center of the building and relocated them to the perimeter of the building. I remember Amy Meadows at the time describing calling these the killer stairs, because as the construction came down on the perimeter of the building through all the departments, and eventually into the window display areas, it took out a fair number of window displays on State Street to create these stairs. This was done so they could create this huge interior space to create a central atrium, a third atrium for the building. I don't remember this model particularly, but if you go there, you can visualize how the atrium was configured. Again, just interesting how some of these remnants are still there. The past is still the present. Going down the escalators in the remaining section of that atrium, you can still see the Marshall Field green and the very 1980s postmodern grill work here, and some of the charming little details of that renovation. Another view of what's left of the central atrium, Marshall Field green and the grill work, and this green, very Marshall Field-like marble accenting in the area. Looking down to the first floor, you see these cutouts, which are included in the drawing, these kind of neoclassical arches and this fake stonework. They kind of created an outside-inside look with the central atrium, and you still get a glimpse of what that vision looked like. Throughout the store, I mean, it is a historic building. It's beautiful architecture, and it's just a delight to traverse the building. You can see some of the light box pops here in the North State light well. The State Street first floor, this is the mid-state room, I believe. Yes, of course it is, with I think it's got primarily cosmetics still. And these chandeliers, which were repurposed from the Water Tower store, when they closed the Water Tower Macy's store during the pandemic, these were relocated to State Street and repurposed here. Chip and Melina have done, and the team have just done such a great job at the Macy's on State. These are a couple of quick shots of the window displays on Randolph, showing the surreal blue sky and surreal garden, kind of a Dr. Seuss looking kind of feeling in a surrealist garden, and some more um, spring fashion with kind of a zany, transportative theme, giving us a glimpse of where we all want to be. We all want to be in a better place, and that's where I was when I visited Macy's in spring here in Chicago. I was in a better place, and it made me feel happy. There's nothing wrong with that. Marshall Field did say, give the lady what she wants, and I hope you do find what you want and make no small plans. If you are planning to come downtown, I guess the three highlights would be visit the Art Institute of Chicago, visit the Bean in Millennium Park, and be sure to visit Macy's on State.